28% rise from financial year 22 to financial year 23. As of March financial year 2023, or as of March of 2023, about 42,270 crore rupees were lying unclaimed with both the private sector bank as well as the public sector bank. Now, these accounts, this money also constitutes the money which is currently in Jan Dhan accounts over and above the rest of the money where banks or accounts have not been operated for over 10 years, because that is what the definition of unclaimed deposit is. If the account and the money lying in the account is untouched for about 10 years, an account is declared as unclaimed deposit.
Yeah, so I think the inoperative accounts could in 8 years turn unclaimed deposits. As of now, I think the numbers need to be seen in isolation. So this 42,000 crore rupees of unclaimed deposits is a huge number. And like you mentioned, it's up almost 30% from the figure last year. And last year when the figure came in at close to 33,000 crore, it was still a fairly alarming, fairly large number. Now, what really happens is that if these unclaimed deposits continue to be unclaimed, then there is a fund in which the government takes this money and uses this money for investor awareness programs, right? But I think there was a ruling by the RBI, in fact, a suggestion by the RBI that all of this money should not go only into public service advertising and investor awareness. Rather, banks have to make an extraordinary effort in identifying the next of kin. And why do you have processes like KYC and stringent KYCs for opening bank accounts? Why do you have that emphasis on a nominee being assigned to every deposit, every bank account or every locker? I think the idea is very simple, that in the case of you becoming inoperative account holders, or in the eventuality of death or demise of the bank holder, there should be somebody who should be able to operate that bank account and should be able to use the money there and transfer it to its rightful owner. But banks seem to be failing at their responsibility of identifying the rightful owners of this 42,000 crore rupees.
And the public sector banks failing more so than the private banks.
And this was exactly the trend last year as well. If you remember, when the data came out last year of 33,000 crore rupees, there was a disproportionate, but you know, to be fair on public sector banks also hold a larger number of accounts than private sector banks. But I think the responsibility is equally split between public sector and private sector banks to be able to identify who the rightful owner of that money is and make sure that one way or another, sooner than later, that money reaches the rightful owners back, rather than banks sitting on it, giving interest also on those on that corpus of funds, but then passing it back to RBI and RBI using it for awareness programs. So I think a very, very clear mandate has to come that any time you've done KYC, you've done the nominee checklist. If that hasn't been done, make the account inoperative. Hound the customers to ensure that the nominee process and the KYC update is complete. And only then I think we will be in a situation that this 42,000 crore rupees lying in our system with no claimants is put to its rightful use.
Absolutely. Put to the rightful use, goes to the rightful owner of that money, which is in next of kin of the person who has not used the money so far, has not been able to make a withdrawal, or perhaps is no more, has deceased. Now, this figure was about 32,000 crores last year, and we heard a number of steps that the banks had taken in order to ensure that the rightful claimant gets the money, which is also by the way of a single window clearance. A portal was made to identify some of the bank account holders, their next of kin, people who could claim that money. Perhaps all of that effort has not really, if you look at the number and you look at it in perspective of the rise of 28% to about 30%, it appears that those steps haven't really yielded anything positive.
So I think the effort has to be in tandem, A, of identifying and repatriating that money to the rightful owner, and B, part of it being used for investor or banker awareness. So I think a right mix is required. It cannot be that every time this data comes out, there are one or two news stories, we being ones who cover it, I think, more than many other publications. But it cannot be that there is one ad in a newspaper or two reports across a period of 1 day, 2 days where that portal gets talked about. I think that portal needs to be advertised, and the money needs to be used to actually advertise that portal to begin with. That if you have somebody in your family who is deceased and you are a next of kin of anybody who's no longer with you, then this is the way to understand what is the kind of money that has been left behind for you. So I think a little bit of using of that fund not only for PSAs, but part of it for relevant PSAs, and making sure that those PSAs help repatriate the rest of the money to the rightful owners.
Absolutely. I think the need of the hour perhaps is more awareness on the matter. So if you have anybody, if you are perhaps using various banking channels, if you have accounts in various banks, kindly go through the nominee list, make sure you nominate your rightful heir or your next of kin, and if you have someone you've lost in your friends, family, relative, distant people, make sure you are able to figure out how many bank accounts they had and whether there was a nominee or not. So more education, more awareness needed on the matter.